Hello, my friends, and welcome to a special episode of 30 Albums for 30 Years. I am your host, Jay Sweet. Today I will be sharing my interview with George Benson, the legendary jazz guitarist, singer, and songwriter. In fact, I would argue that he is one of the greatest guitarists ever to pick up the instrument. He has had a career that has spanned over 7 decades, has won over 10 Grammys, and has had 4 top 10 albums on the Billboard Charts, which includes the number 1 monster hit, Breezin from 1976. That one sold an estimated 10 million records. Now, at the age of 80, George Benson is on tour, and I was fortunate to speak with him regarding his upcoming performance at the NJPAC in Newark, New Jersey. That's going to take place on June 2nd. It was an interview that I conducted through my contacts at New Jersey Jazz Magazine. So there will be an article accompanying this interview. Now, connecting with Mr. Benson was not easy at all. We started inquiring about an interview for about a year. It took about a year, and we hit many roadblocks. And then when I did finally secure a date for a phone interview, I called him, and his voice message was full. He didn't pick up. So then we rescheduled again, and the same thing happened. Now, this time I asked for a second number, who I thought was his wife, but instead someone named Stephanie picked up, and she said she can connect us. So after she said this, she accidentally hung up on me, and then she called back and connected us. So this sort of ruined my recording setup for the interview because I have a specific setup that I use when calling somebody. When she called me back, it kind of changed everything. So it was a quick scramble to at least voice record the interview. So by no means is this the best way for me to conduct these interviews in terms of audio quality, but we made it happen, and you can hear George Benson pretty clearly. So anyway, once we sorted everything out, I thought Mr. Benson and I were having a nice conversation, and then out of nowhere, this Stephanie jumped back in on the phone after, I don't know, about 13, 14 minutes, and maybe she was listening the entire time, I don't know, but then she told me I only had one more question for Mr. Benson because he had to go speak to a producer or something. So I was not given any indication beforehand of a timeline. I'm always respectful of the artist's time when I do these interviews, but had I known it would be a shorter conversation, I definitely would have patterned the conversation a little differently. But regardless, I did get some good stuff, and I did get to speak with George Benson, and it was a nice talk for sure. I think he's a guy who is deserving of even more attention and accolades. I was actually surprised that so many younger people didn't know who George Benson was. I actually even find it curious that given his success in the pop markets and the jazz markets, that he's not yet even been considered, to my knowledge, for induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. But regardless, it doesn't much matter. I hope you enjoy my interview with George Benson. It was certainly a pleasure to speak to such a legend. So here you go. Hello.
How you doing there, man?
Hey, I got you. Good to hear your voice.
Man, I've been waiting on that call, but the Wi-Fi is destructive around here. It's ridiculous.
No problem. Thanks for taking the time. I appreciate it.
All right, let's jump on it.
All right, cool. So I wanted to talk to you about your upcoming tour. I know you're going to be in Newark. Tell me what we can expect from a George Benson tour.
Well, as traditionally, we have a great band, and we look forward to playing to our New Jersey audiences that we've always played for many years, but we don't get back as often as we'd like. So this is a rare but wonderful opportunity for us.
Excellent. And you're going to be playing, all the hits or some new?
I've tried it all different kinds of ways.
Right.
I used to come out and try to be, one-dimensional for that night, just that one night. Play everything different, stuff they never heard before. Never pleased anybody. So I find that familiarity breeds contempt is a good phrase.
Right.
And we got enough hits that people come to hear. It makes a lot of people happy. So I find that that's the best method, to include our hits as a major part of our program.
Excellent. Great. So if I can go back a ways, and I'm actually, you might find this interesting, I'm doing a biography on Ray Brown. So I'm very in tune with the Pittsburgh music scene. And I wanted to ask you about, why do you think Pittsburgh has created so many fantastic musicians like yourself?
Well, I asked that question years ago, or I wondered about it, and the answer was given to me over the years. And I suspect that this is the truth of the matter. Musicians on their way to New York used to stop in Pittsburgh because Pittsburgh had a new invention. It was called the Pennsylvania Turnpike. It was the only one of its kind. It went straight from Pittsburgh for 300 miles towards New York, the Big Apple. And so the musicians coming out of the Midwest, Chicago and all those areas, Kansas City and all of them, stopped in Pittsburgh because they know Pittsburgh is where the jam sessions were. Cats used to tune up in Pittsburgh on their way to the Big Apple.
Right.
And while they were in Pittsburgh, they ran into some fabulous musicians, and it became a two-way street. Not only did they learn about these great musicians, such as Billy Eckstine, and Mary Lou Williams, and Art Blakey, and gobs of other great musicians. But they would jam together, and they became part of that scene. So when they got to New York, they were known too. Right. By the time I got to New York, I was much later than these guys. I should say, let's say a generation later. Mm-hmm. I found that many of the musicians, the old timers, knew about me already, because the word had been passed on to them that this little boy, little Georgie Benson, is going to mean something one day. Right. And good for me that it turned out that way. But yeah, to me, Ray Brown has always been one of those cats at the top of the list of musicians that Pittsburgh was very, very proud of, even though we had many, many, great artists.
Yeah, absolutely. So did you wind up did you go to high school in Shenley School as well?
No, but I knew about Shenley. Shenley was a top flight high school in Pittsburgh. I didn't live in that district. I lived at a place called the Hills District. Mm. And it was just before you got to downtown Pittsburgh. And it was a very steeply sloped street called Bedford Avenue. And there was two schools there. I went to both of them. The first one was Lecce Elementary. It went up to maybe, I don't know, the 6th or 7th grade. And then I switched right next door to Conley Vocational High School. I wanted to learn the vocation so I could have a job. So I learned electric power and commercial art.
Interesting. Okay, cool. So then coming up, how do you, it sounds like from what I've read, you started out in singing groups and maybe played the ukulele, if I'm correct. How does that...
Yeah, the ukulele was first, actually. When I was a little boy, my stepfather met my mother when I was about 7 years old. And he was a guitar player. But, my hands were too small to play a guitar. And he got tired of me messing with his guitar, so he found the ukulele in a garbage can.
Wow. Okay.
And it was all cracked up, and he glued it back together and put some strings on it, and he taught me a few chords. And I made a small fortune with that.
So then how did it translate to guitar?
Well, that was when I was 7. When I turned 9, my hands started to get larger. So they bought me a guitar for about $15. So, that wasn't a high quality instrument. Yeah. But that was my transition. And I started working, the street corners with my guitar in my hand now.
Right. And any formal teachers at that age, or just kind of figured it out?
Yeah, mostly me figuring it out, but I was smart enough to go to the top of the class. I lived in a neighborhood that had 2 fabulous nightclubs. One was the Jazz House of Pittsburgh, and the other one was the R&B House of Pittsburgh. Mm. One was called Birdie's Hurricane. It was the R&B house. And let me see, what was the Jazz House? I can't think of it now, but it was only one in Pittsburgh. Mm-hmm. And whenever new artists came in, I would try to get in touch with them, especially if they had a guitar in the group. And I would ask questions about the guitar. Most of them, almost all of them, showed me something. And so I'm a combination of all of those guitar players who gave me things, projects.
Right. So who were some of the early guitarists you met, or early influences, you would say?
There was a guitar player. You remember the organ started getting popular in the late 50s.
Right.
Well, I think mid 50s, but I started getting in contact with the organ and seeing them in nightclubs in the late 50s. And one was Jimmy Smith, was one of the greatest organists in the world, if not the best. Mm-hmm. He had a guitar player with him called Thornell Schwartz. You would think he would be a Caucasian, but no, he was an African American. It was Thornell Schwartz. Okay. And then they had this second guitar player was called Eddie McFadden. Mm-hmm. Both of those cats were from Philadelphia, but they came through Pittsburgh on a regular basis with one organ player or another. And then we started hearing all of these wonderful guitar players like Kenny Burrell. Mm. And a friend of mine on the weekend would have a jam session at his house. Not a jam session, a teaching session. And he would play records, and he would explain to me all of these new guitar players. He said, well, now, here's a guy. His name is Grant Green. He's brand new. Mm. We checked him out, and he would show us the chords that he was playing. The guy would say, well, the chord he's playing here is this, that, and the other,
Right. Okay, cool. And so go ahead, I'm sorry.
And then Wes Montgomery, of course, and gobs of others whose names I can't remember now.
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah. So then I read somewhere that I think you met Charlie Parker at one point in your youth. What was that like for you?
I did not meet Charlie Parker.
Oh, you did not?
My father kept his name in my face all the time. Not my stepfather, but my natural father, who was also a musician. He played piano, trombone, and drums. Mm. But he loved Charlie Parker. Charlie Parker was his friend. They used to hang out a lot, especially when Charlie Parker came to Pittsburgh. But then he would also, because you remember Charlie Parker was in Billy Eckstine's band, right, along with Miles Davis and Sarah Vaughan and all those other people. Sure. So one day my father got on me very heavy because I started to become very popular in Pittsburgh as an artist around, working in a lot of the R&B houses, little bars, corner bars and stuff like that. And so he asked me a question, why you keep playing all that corny stuff? I said, what corny stuff are you talking about? He said, this stuff that you keep playing the same song over and over. They're corny. They ain't got no musicality about them. And I said, man, that's what the people want to hear, Dad. And he said, man, why don't you play like Charlie Parker? I said, Charlie who? And he said, no, I know why you can't play nothing. If you never heard of Charlie Parker, I know why you can't play. Oh. So I made it my business to find out who Charlie Parker was.
Excellent, cool. And then tell me about your meeting of and work with Jack McDuff.
Well, Jack McDuff came through Pittsburgh, and he was in need of a guitar player who was leaving the band. He hadn't left yet. And by the way, this is another one of the guys, his name was Eddie, too. Eddie Deal. D-E-I-L. Mm-hmm. He was a fabulous guitar player. I couldn't understand why Jack was trying to get rid of him. I found out through Jack that he wanted more blues. And Eddie Deal was basically a jazz guitar player, a very good one. So somebody recommended I go out and try out for the job. I said, no, I'm not ready for nothing like that. I mean, I got decent ears, but I'm not a jazz player. They said, yeah, you can play it, man. Go out and check it out. So I went out to the club, and sure enough, Jack McDuff liked me. I didn't know why. But anyway, he hired me to go on the road with him. And he fired me the first night. Oh. After we got on the road, he heard me play, and he said, no, I don't think you're going to be able to make it with our band. He said, but I'll keep you in the band until we get to New York. I think I got a group that's going to love you. So I said, I'm happy to just be doing something, important out there on the road. I said, thank you for the gig, I was happy. And when his manager heard the band, he said, did I hear you say you're going to fire this kid? Because I was 19 then. And Jack said, yeah, why? Manager said, you can't fire him. He said, what do you mean I can't fire him? He said, your band sounds 10 times better with him in it than it did when last time I heard you.
Wow.
so he said, I suggest we go in the studio and make an album with him. And so we did, and the album was, lightweight hit. And then it started me on a new career.
Right, cool, great. And then you started doing your own recordings, I guess, around 21 or so, right?
1964, I guess I was, just about, a little above 20,
Right. So they give you...
I did an album.
Right, and so that's New Boss Guitar, if I'm correct, right? That's a pretty... that's a pretty lofty title to give somebody for their first album.
I didn't realize what it was going on, but later on, people make anything out of everything. I had just bought a brand new guitar called the Super 400, and it was fabulous, man. I never thought I'd be able to buy a $1,000 guitar, And I had the Super 400, so my manager, or Jack's manager, he said, yeah, man, that's a Boss guitar. So they called the album based on the new guitar and not my playing.
Oh, wow. That's funny.
So it had nothing to do with my playing.
Oh, wow. I thought it was like a Wes Montgomery kind of a reference, That's crazy.
Nobody would have enough nerve to say they could play guitar better than Wes Montgomery. The new Wes Montgomery, there was no such person on the planet.
That's crazy. All right, so and then on those early records, you weren't singing much. Was that something you wanted to sing more, or just didn't happen for you?
There was a law in Jack McDuff's band. I want no singing. I can't stand singers. He said singers got credit. The musicians didn't get any credit, even though they were a lot better musically. He said, but people would take a mediocre singer over a great musician. And he hated that. Wow. So he said, I don't want no singing in my band, so I didn't sing. Right,
and then, but even on your own early records, still not so much with the singing, right?
Because I was now becoming known as a guitar player. So I enjoyed that. I said, man, one day a guy called me a guitarist. Oh man, what a title that was. I'm not a guitar player. I'm a guitarist, man. So the prestige was well loved and well liked.
Interesting.
Hey guys, it's Stephanie piping in here. I just wanted to say one last question because Mr. Benson has to jump on the phone with his producer. He's in the middle of a recording session right now.
Oh, okay, no problem. No problem. Cool. Then I guess if I can, Mr. Benson, let me just ask you one question about 1976, Breezin, and then it's hit album after hit album. Was that did that surprise you? Or how did that transition happen from jazz guitarist to pop superstar?
Of course, that album surprised everybody. Nobody had ever been where Breezin took us. We were just some young, enthusiastic players. We believed we was bad. And we were in New York City, man, with all the baddest players in the world. And we had a bad band full of young improvisers who were unmatched. Nobody ever heard about what they could play. They didn't know what they could play. And so when we put that on record and people heard that, they said, man, that's some different stuff, And I put one vocal on there, which many people didn't know I even sang. And they were not going to put it on the album because Simon Boomer said, no, it's too good instrumentally. I'm not going to destroy this album by putting a vocal on it. But when people heard the vocal, they said, you got to put this on the album. And this Master Ray took that album to the moon.
Absolutely.
I got to go, my friend.
All right. Hey, it was a pleasure talking to you. Thanks for the great music for all these years. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you.
All right.
I appreciate it.
All right. Take care now. Bye.
All right, Stephanie, I'm gone.